Hello, everyone. My name is Gabriel Adler, and I'm excited to bring to you our remote management with Intune education training today. I'm a regional software solutions manager within our integrated technology group with a focus on our public sector Microsoft solutions here at CDW. I've been at CDW for 15 years in numerous capacities, and I'm extremely excited to introduce the amazing group of speakers we have lined up for you today. If you want, you can follow me on Twitter at Gabriel Adler. So from CDW, we have Ben Moore. Ben Moore is a solution architect focusing on the M365 suite for the central US region. He has been with CDW for over 6 years. 5 of those years as a field consultant supporting professional services objectives nationwide. His primary focus had been around SCCM, Intune, and Windows imaging. His experience spans over 23 years of IT. Now, Ben speaks to customers, large and small, intimately, and at seminars about M365. His passion has grown into security and how customers can protect their environments by harnessing Microsoft's technology stack. Also from CDW, we have Brandon Pierce. Brandon is a practice architect on the software solution team focusing on Microsoft Cloud, hybrid, and on-premise solutions. He has been at CDW for over 8 years and in IT in various roles from engineering, consulting, global productivity and collaboration system design for over 22 years. In his current role, he is responsible for Microsoft Solutions go-to-market strategies, solution strategy, technical sales enablement focusing on M365, Office 365, and security. From Microsoft, we have Lorena Mora. Lorena Mora is an education technical specialist for Microsoft Education, focused on enabling and enhancing modern workplace and classroom collaboration services in the United States. She's on a mission to empower every education customer at scale in partnership with CDWG. Lorena has worked in many technology roles over the last 12 years, including prior experience as a senior IT leader at Chicago Public Schools, third largest school district in the US. You can follow her on Twitter @_Lorena Mora and follow her podcast, Women Know IT, on @Women Know IT. So let's jump into today's agenda. Today, we're going to talk about school IT and device management needs, key remote classroom features. We're going to show you a demo on Intune for Education and Autopilot, and then we're going to wrap up with CDW services. So, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our experts.
All right, thanks a lot, Gabriel. So this is Ben Moore, as Gabriel kindly introduced me, and also with us is Lorena. We're going to go through a couple things. First, in talking about the current state of managing IT using things like Microsoft's technologies. And Lorena, if you're on also, we're going to go through a couple things within this. What's going on right now? What are you seeing, from Microsoft's perspective around IT challenges that schools are having right now?
Yeah, absolutely, Ben. And thanks so much, Gabe, for the introduction as well. Especially when we think about technology today in the way that it's being introduced into education, what we're seeing in education from a K-12 perspective, specifically, we're seeing that there's more challenges with fewer resources to be able to handle these things when it comes to the introduction of devices. So if you think about our current landscape, we have a number of different types of devices out there, whether that's a laptop, desktop, we have mobile devices. We also have a plethora of applications that we have across the board. And that's really introducing a lot of complexity. You see that a lot in businesses altogether, but when you couple that with the K-12 space, generally, again, you're going to have fewer resources available and potentially a lot more different scenarios. For instance, you have classrooms that are sharing devices within a building. You have certain schools that maybe are implementing a one-to-one scenario for students, one device per one student. You may even have schools that are providing or allowing faculty, staff, and students to bring in their own devices. So how do you actually work through all of those different pieces as we see the different trends across the board for our schools? If you think about it, we really want to make sure that from a Microsoft perspective, we are meeting all of these needs. We want to provide something that not only meets the different scenarios, but also is able to manage details. How do you restrict or how do you make device restrictions within a device? How do you make sure that students are safe on a device and are only accessing what they need on a daily basis? How do we give them the tools that they need to succeed within the classroom on a daily basis, as well as teachers and staff? We also want to provide an opportunity for our customers to see a solution that is affordable. So there's definitely a lot of different things, Ben, that we see within that view.
So I'm going to bring up a screen here, and for many educators that work in the IT world, this probably looks very familiar. I've worked with school systems in the past, and a lot of times I've heard it lovingly called summer blitz, where all the machines that have been currently used for the past school system or for the past school year got pulled back in for reimaging. A lot of new purchases got brought in, and being able to maintain those, provide images around those, and get those all ready and prepped so that they're ready for the new school year coming up. And Lorena, are those things that you're seeing too in the field right now and hearing from customers? These are frustration points even of they lovingly call it summer blitz, and yet it is definitely a pain to have to deal with sometimes.
Absolutely, Ben. I even think back to my experience at Chicago Public Schools where I would go into different buildings where this was it. And maybe this was a classroom that wasn't being used, a multi-purpose room at the end of the school year, just trying to get everything set up. It's as chaotic as that picture seems, and maybe even more. So really our customers and, really our customers are looking at this from a very complex perspective. How do we actually introduce something that's going to support them?
Yeah, there's hopefully, a better way, and maybe that's something we can touch on first is when Windows 10 was developed early on, Windows 10 was developed as an operating system, as a mobile operating system. It can receive mobile device management policy very similar to an iOS or an Android device with MDM. It respects group policy, but it was really designed at its core to be managed as an MDM. So Microsoft provided an expansion of Intune. So Intune is Microsoft's mobile device management solution, but at the core of it, they really went back to the drawing board on making sure that they had a good, streamlined environment for educators to be able to utilize. They heard from the market, some of it is too complex, some of it is just too hard to get up off the ground. And so Microsoft heard that feedback from school systems and went back to the drawing board on being able to create a layer for the web front end to be able to manage that, to easily get it off of the ground. So to be able to have this console to easily go in, get it set up quickly, and get things configured to be able to use it in your environment around an education-focused profile.
Yeah, and what's great about Intune, just as you see on the screen as well, is that, we're creating something that's easily accessible for anyone. So thinking about those challenges that we face on a day-to-day basis, if you're doing more with less, if you have, tech-savvy teachers or Bob the bus driver, anyone else who is supporting IT within a school, from a Microsoft perspective, we also wanted to ensure that we're giving the tools to our schools to succeed in that. So not only is it a better and easy way to manage Windows 10, as Ben mentioned, as a mobile operating system, and give the tools for that perspective, but also to give it a feel for education, something specific to education where it's addressing all of the different scenarios and challenges we just mentioned, but that it's easy to use and that it gets to the point of what you're looking for.
Yeah, all great call outs on that. So the other thing though is there's a lot of different options. There isn't just a single cookie cutter approach to what works best for you as a school system a lot of times. So Microsoft has multiple different avenues to be able to roll that out, whether it's more simplistic rollout with Intune. If you're a larger school system, maybe you're using things like Configuration Manager, using the updated Microsoft Endpoint Manager solution. If you're familiar with what SCCM has been over the years, that's really what my background is building images around SCCM and being able to manage endpoints. But that might be too big of a pill to really bite off. So Microsoft also has smaller solutions around set up a school PCs, which is a simplistic app to very quickly roll that out to things like a thumb drive to image those machines and provision them. So there's definitely a good fit for what your school size is and what your technology requirements are around that, with a very key slant towards education needs. So in some of the things that you have to deal with, it's not just deployment. It's not just getting it, to the user's hands, but, it's a life cycle management around getting these machines bulk enrolled, getting them set up, whether you're using things like that set up a school PCs app that's real simplistic and it's in the Windows Education Store, or it's the configuration designer that creates a provisioning package around config that doesn't require any cloud capacity. We also have Autopilot, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, around being able to auto-provision that device in the cloud so that you can ship a device straight to a student or straight to your end users to be able to boot it up, be able to log into it, and very quickly utilize it, which we'll be showing in a demo in a little bit. And then for the machines that you already have in your environment, to automatically pull those in for provisioning for the next go-around in this life cycle. And then as this device lives and breathes in your environment, how do you manage it on an ongoing basis? You want to push out software to these users. You want to be able to push out web links for different e-learning initiatives where teachers are using websites. And they want to be able to have a central repository for being able to push this out easily to their student body, especially in scenarios where the student may not be at school, they're at home, so they're using their one-to-one assigned device. They can now have those things pushed down to them in real time so that they get it even when they're at home. And then to be able to have ongoing management of that device to ensure that it's locked down, it's secure, and the student can use it more like an appliance use and not have to worry about having the full capacity of a computer that's out of your standard IT purview. You still get the peace of mind to know that they're getting good quality lockdown on their security of their device. And then at the end of the school year, having way better of an experience beyond that summer blitz that we were talking about before, around that retire or redeploy. What do you do with devices, at the end of the school year? How are you going to handle bringing them back in and getting them either A, set up so they're ready for the next school year, or B, they're ready to be fully pulled out of the life cycle, and you want to make sure that there's no student data on there, you want to make sure there's no school data on there, you want to just make sure that it's clean wiped and ready to be removed from service. So a couple of things that are kind of key to our remote classroom settings, some of the things that we want to touch on. I'll turn this over to Lorena and have her talk about a few things around school data sync and what some things that you can do around your rostering and keeping your environment clean but well-oiled.
Thanks, Ben. One of the things that we think about when we talk about device management is how do we manage these devices to begin with? How are we setting up a grouping structure that makes the most sense within education? What we offer at Microsoft is a free tool called School Data Sync that provides IT departments with the ability to create groups based on the way that your schools look today. Whether that's being able to utilize your school data, your school information system to automatically roster classroom information, and then be able to then create groups based on how your classrooms are actually structured within your school. So the 3 pillars that we have here and the reasons why we really recommend our schools to look at School Data Sync when you think about Intune and any of our Office 365 portals is really about saving time. Instead of having teachers or IT admins or anyone else creating groups to be able to manage devices, as an example, they don't have to create anything on their own. They don't have to manage any groups manually. Any information from a school information system can be uploaded into School Data Sync, and then all that information gets updated. So for instance, if a student transfers from one school to another or one class to another, you can upload that information to School Data Sync, and your groups will be able to update based on the information that you provided. So it really provides better access and better information for our schools to be able to manage the information that's within your environment. Additionally, from an admin perspective, because of the rostering, that also saves time, because now you have that ability to have everything reflected, such as like class membership, like we talked about back in. It saves money because, again, it's reducing that administrative burden. It's creating those digital classrooms and grouping environments so that you're able to go in and look at groups that are relevant to what you're dealing with. If you're looking at a school site as an example and you wanted to manage groups based on who's in that particular group, you can do that as well. And lastly, School Data Sync is based and built on Azure, which is our cloud platform, and also Office 365. So it has full integration with any of your Office 365 apps like Microsoft Teams, and being a big example of that, you're able, again, to create that experience.
And those are really cool points around the fact of, if a student, moves to a different class and they have different requirements for a class, when that roster gets updated, they may have a standard set of applications on their assigned laptop. And now that they move to a new class, they automatically see those new things pushed down to them based on group management, which we're going to go to in a little bit here, so that you can see really the power of that on being able to have that roster data feed into groups, and that dynamic nature of if a student ebbs and flows through different groups, it determines what they see, what they can't see, even to the point of license assignments for what they're allowed to have or not allowed to have. So all great points. Just to move over to this next slide, if you are interested in looking at SDS and being able to utilize its technologies, this is the link out to that for a deployment that you can do. There are some sample CSV files that are available out there. So even without dealing with your own roster, you could pull in those CSV files to be able to see how that roster actually populates if you would sign up for a trial around this. And then further to Lorena's point, and if Lorena wants to expand further on it, is just some of the great things around this, that as this data proliferates through your environment in this platform, then what are the things that end users can actually see and realize? Because it's not just Microsoft we're talking about. We're talking about, this API feeds into this identity platform. You can take advantage of single sign-on. And then, as you can see there to the right, there are a lot of great education platforms that I'm sure a lot of schools use all day long around Moodle and Edmodo to be able to have that single sign-on experience, and those are automatically assigned to the students based on that rostering sync into groups.
Yeah, one thing I'll add is that School Data Sync really is based on the OneRoster API, And so as you're working through and thinking about your student information system and how compatible it will be, if as OneWaster API being an IMS global standard, something that a lot of our different ed tech apps are really aligning towards, we are also OneWaster compliant from that perspective. We also do have a built-in integration into PowerSchool where you're able to connect directly if you are using PowerSchool as a student information system for your school or school district. We are able to make that direct feed into PowerSchool and make this process a lot easier.
Yeah, that's some really cool stuff to be able to do, to have that power built into all of that to make things easier. So another example of being able to harness the power of group assignment, where these users or students or faculty, where they trickle into these groups, what are some of the things that we can set? And this is just a small example that's outlined. There's actually over 180 settings now, and it continues to grow for policies that are MDM policies that are being pushed down to these Windows 10 devices to allow turning on or off of cameras, whether you allow removable storage, like having USB drives and locking USB drives out. A really important one when you do have remote students, they're working from home, they're taking their laptops home with them, is having Windows Update preferences set so that you still get all the power and control of being able to determine what the experience for that student is, setting maintenance windows and off times to allow updates to run, so it doesn't interfere with their school day on being able to go through these through their education process and not being interrupted with Windows updates. But you as an admin still get the peace of mind to know that you're staying compliant, you're staying up to date, you're closing exploit holes with different security issues that come up, so you have that total control. Around update for your lock screen and desktop image, you want to have a continuity of identity around your school. You want to continue to push to make sure the student knows that this isn't their laptop. It's so important to make sure that they kind of know that, so they treat it so that you can actually pull that laptop back and use it next school year. But also to just continue to drive school identity around what your lock screen and desktop image is, and a whole other set of things. The thing we're going to talk about next too is around that Windows Autopilot, being able to set up Autopilot to be able to provision that device and ultimately to be able to do a reset on it so that you don't have to deal with that dreaded summer blitz of having to re-image all your machines. Now it's not a re-imaging process. It's actually a re-provisioning so that it's set and ready to go for next year. So we'll go through that in our demo too. Anything else that you want to kind of throw in here, Lorena, that stands out that you want to make sure that they know is available?
Apart from this being amazing, just generally, if you think about how far we've come, to your point, Ben, we do not have to create images. That statement warrants an additional repetition here, because a lot of our customers, a lot of folks who are using this today still believe that you have to re-image Windows devices to be able to prep for everything. As you see on the screen, and as Ben just went through, we are able to go through and make changes to Windows 10 devices really ad hoc, right? We're able to go through, and with a toggle, and what you'll see in just a moment in our demo is that we can go and change these granular settings to be able to meet the need for that particular group that you're managing, whether that's a school group, teacher, student, a classroom, a devices group, a staff group, whatever it makes sense for you. You can not only just target these particular things and make sure that you have the restrictions that you need, but that it's also simple and easy to do through a web portal, which is something that we want to make sure that all of our customers understand. These seem very basic in nature, but know that Intune for Education is powerful enough to really satisfy what your needs are. If you have been living in that previous world of just having to create your golden image, having to deploy that out and spend weeks on end to be able to support, you know, all of your device deployments.
And I think it also begs to be noted too is that you're not trading in the full capacity of enterprise level Intune for a thinner version of Intune for Education. If you do have a battle ready IT department that's really looking to be able to dig in deeper, Intune for Enterprise is still available. So if there are deeper settings that you want to get into, you can. But this provides a very simplistic way to get ramped up and get the most important settings possible set for your student body and for your faculty and staff. So I had mentioned about Autopilot Reset and how you can utilize it to be able to basically pull a machine back. And when you set Autopilot Reset, it can be done in a couple different ways. At the base level is just being able to turn it on the machine itself. They actually provide the capacity to kick it off straight from the login screen so that you can set it to reset itself right there on the spot. And it puts it back out into out-of-box experience, or UBI as we call it. But you also have the capacity in the Intune console that you can set Autopilot Reset to machines throughout the entire list of devices, and it'll send a policy down to that machine, whether the machine's live and actively receiving policy, or just at the very next time that it boots up and it phones home to Azure AD, it'll receive that policy. And the nice thing is it'll remove all the apps, all the settings, and the personal files off of it. It'll preserve Active Directory or Azure Active Directory join and MDM enrollment. So the device is still managed. It doesn't become temporarily off the rails, if you will. It's always still within the control of your purview. It preserves any provisioning packages that you may have pushed down, any keyboard, language, and Wi-Fi setting, and takes about 20 to 30 minutes to complete on typical hardware. So when you think about that, even if you allow students who are going to be coming back the next school year and you let them keep their laptop now over the summer, now maybe that's a nightmare situation and you still want to bring it in, but you have options now where you could actually time bomb that device to reset it back, its out-of-box experience, and when it's time, that student would log into it and it would have that new rostering data hopefully updated for now they're going into the next grade, now they're doing whatever they're doing with different classes and schools. They're going to, at first logon, have all of the settings that they need on a go-forward basis. So a lot of great things that you can get out of this reset capability with Autopilot that you didn't necessarily have the agility to do prior. So another point around security and things that you can push out. So we talked a little bit about the settings that you can push down around Windows Update, but you can also manage Defender. Now, Defender, when we think about it, yes, it is an anti-malware, antivirus security config, but Defender has a broad swath of security that can be applied on that device, including Defender controls the firewall. So being able to set all of those settings against a machine to ensure it's doing its scans in real time, it's doing behavior monitoring, it locks the student out of being able to get into Security Center to really see or mess with anything. So you can really lock those settings down, scan things, set exceptions for things. So being able to have that capacity in the Intune console for being able to push those MDM policies down. And then also, as I mentioned earlier, around doing Azure AD enrolled so that the device is always connected and syncing. There's no cached login. There's no AD sync that you have to worry about. This is really important. You know, as a past admin, I would deal with people that would work off-site and they wouldn't VPN into our environment. Their device would no longer be synchronized with AD. The device, when the password changes in AD twice, their Kerberos credential is now out of sync. So they no longer could log in against the domain controller if they ever walked in to the school or into the office. And then also for password sync, so that if a student or faculty would change their password, it now can roll it back onto your on-prem domain controller. And there's no out of sync problems where the user has a password, but the device still has the cache Kerberos credential, and they have to VPN in, they have to bring it back into school before it's all synchronized up. Those things go away now with being able to have a full hybridized device that's Azure AD joined. Now, when it comes to Windows 10, there's a lot of great security features around Windows 10 for Education that's pretty much at parity with Windows 10 Enterprise. So with the advent of moving from traditional legacy BIOS over to a UEFI BIOS, you get the capabilities of Secure Boot first and foremost. So at the basic layer, having Secure Boot as a security standard that really keeps that device's boot from using software that's only trusted by the OEM, so that there can't be any rootkit injections or anything that would even work. It would be completely neutered with a UEFI BIOS with Secure Boot. And then all these other guards, application guard, credential guard, device guard, exploit guard, they all sit on top of what's called a hypervisor code integrity layer. It uses Hyper-V basically as an obfuscation layer between the operating system and these things that could be injected. Things like credential guard that protect against pass the hash scenarios using exploits like Mimikatz to be able to laterally move through an environment where it actually hides the LSASS process in a micro VM so that it can't be exploited. Or device guard, where device guard will protect any driver injections from doing code integrity exploits with non-signed drivers, so that you have this extra coverage across devices that could potentially be exploited with, improper web surfing or accessing files that potentially would have exploits in it that would get on your device. So not only are you protecting with Defender against things like, anti-malware, antivirus scenarios, but you're also covering it from the other side of completely securing and locking down Windows 10. And then just to briefly showcase this through the fact that there are multiple security options that are included across the M365 education stack. We won't go into it laboriously, but some of the things of note around Azure Active Directory Premium, and being able to do single sign-on, which is really important, like I mentioned, around setting up easy access into things like Moodle and Edmodo. But if you want to go to an extra layer, maybe for your faculty and staff, is having multi-factor authentication, having conditional access policies to protect against an environment, and just having a further insight into protecting identity and access management. We've been talking about Intune for Education here and how it also can tie in directly with SCCM. So now that SCCM's grown up a little bit more and it's Microsoft Endpoint Manager now, is those two can conjoin so that you can have an on-prem management with Configuration Manager and have in-cloud management with Intune, but be able to share all of that data. For different higher ed sometimes, and even in certain research and whatnot, Azure Information Protection is great because now you can have in-motion encryption on your file structures. So if you have data that you want to protect, or say for instance, there's data that has student identity in it, it has faculty identity in it, social security numbers, credit card numbers, with Azure Information Protection, you can now protect that data and make sure it's encrypted so that if it would ever slip the boundaries of where you protect files and gets onto somebody else's machine, that data is encrypted and can't be accessed. And then between Cloud App Security, which is a CASB, and it's a cloud access broker, for being able to protect data as it goes out to these SaaS solutions that maybe you're using for your school system. And then advanced threat analytics, which is really important on making sure what are the oddball things that are happening in your environment. I was a kid once, and my biggest desire was to find out how far I could get into my school's ecosystem. And so having something like advanced threat analytics in your environment, it's listing for every little authentication that's hitting the domain controller and it's looking for anomalous processes that just are not normal. There's no reason that Ben Moore should be casing the joint through NSLOOKUP and doing queries against domain groups, but it'll pick up that anomalous process and it'll flag it in alerting. So there's a lot of great security where you can enhance your investment in the Microsoft stack. And then one last thing I want to make sure to mention on this one too is this always gets overlooked, and I get asked a lot, how can we support our student body when they are remote? They took their laptop home, they're having some problems. We don't want to turn into necessarily the help desk for every single problem that comes up, but sometimes it's just hard to get to that student to be able to support them, to get them back up and running. Quick Assist is a great free app that's built into Windows 10 where you can fire it up, you can give assistance and give the code to the other end user. They put in your code and you quickly connect with them to be able to provide them support. And that's so important, when it can get very frustrating at times when they're at home, they're on their laptop, you're not able to get to them to be able to remediate the problem, and they're down. That's also valid very much so for faculty and staff on being able to get to them quickly, to get them up and running, because I'm sure teachers, as they're working a lot of times from home and being able to figure things out and provide non-traditional education initiatives, to be able to very quickly get support around those things. All right, so I know that we touched a little bit about Autopilot earlier, but just to recap on some of these things is, there are ways to be able to enroll Windows 10 devices, whether it's through pre-registration of the device in the Autopilot deployment, where there's no IT intervention. And I'm going to talk about that in a little bit because there's some really great things CDW can do to help you out around that. Now, if you're not necessarily fully in the cloud or you're looking for any quick, cheaper way to go about it, there is Windows Configuration Designer, where you can configure all of the MDM policies, but save it to a provisioning file and save that provisioning file out to a thumb drive, send it out to all of your schools, unbox laptops, pop USBs in, and they get a full configuration with a domain join and everything. And even to the far right here for the Set Up a School PCs app, same concept, but way simpler. It only has, a small subset of policy settings that you would have on hand for maybe it's the SSID for that particular school, and it's a standard naming structure that you want to use for that school, and a few other settings to make sure that those devices are under control and configured and domain joined. But it's something as simplistic as the teacher could actually unbox their laptops that are assigned to their students, pop in this USB drive. It certainly doesn't require an IT degree to be able to do it. Microsoft's painstakingly gone through the steps to make sure that this is nice and concise and quick to do. Now, around that simple enrollment, like we said, to be able to enroll those directly into Intune for Education without any software install. Now, that's a great thing if you've dealt with MDM in the past, where you have to roll out a client and you have to make sure that that client goes through different things, and especially when maybe people already have their devices and trying to get them rolled back into, hey, can you bring that laptop back in? We need to do X, Y, and Z to it. Windows 10 already has it built in to be managed by Intune. So being able to associate those devices that you may already have in AD, in your Active Directory environment, they can now receive the policy to get them to join in the Intune and bring them under control. So you get that full capacity of not only an on-prem capability of management through GPO, but also through remote to be able to manage them in the cloud wherever they might be. Now, the one that I really liked and the one that I mentioned that CDW could potentially help you out on this is with Autopilot. When you purchase devices through CDW, we can go ahead and declare those orders as yours in your tenant, where you can designate us as having permission to upload the hardware hashes of the devices that you purchase. So CDWG can go ahead and take that information at purchase time, put it up into the cloud. The devices are shipped. Now, granted, they could be shipped to your school. They could be shipped straight to your students directly if need be. And so nothing really needs to be done more if needed. Otherwise, there are other further steps that your staff could do if you deem necessary. But otherwise, those devices are configured in Intune for Education, and they're ready to have them be booted up by the end user. And that's ultimately what you do, whether it's first day of school and you're handing out laptops or you're shipping it directly to them if need be, that they now have the capability that first day they boot up, they go through out-of-box experience, but instead of a consumer experience, it goes ahead and Azure AD joins it. It pulls it into Intune for configuration. It pulls down any of the apps that have been applied to them and any of the settings that are needed to bring it into compliance to lock that device down. And you can learn more about that on Microsoft site too under aka.ms at Windows Autopilot. All right, all good information. So one of the things that's great about CDW and something that we've been able to do with one of our customers is in this case study that's on both Microsoft's website and CDW's website, where we were able to help out the Immaculate Heart of Mary School in Cincinnati, Ohio. We were able to come in and help them get Intune for Education off the ground. And there was a lot of great feedback that came back, and even in this point from Tim Thalheimer. I've been telling people CDW is everything I didn't know I needed, and I really believe it's true. That's great feedback to hear from him because we were able to get them ramped up to using Intune. We were able to make their life so much easier around being able to use that technology stack to manage their devices. So great feedback. Take a look at it at aka.ms/CDW-IHOM. All right, so what we're going to do is we're going to take an example machine for a teacher and what their experience would be like if they were using Intune for Education with Autopilot. So I'm going to start up this VM. This is a teacher that I have pre-configured. So imagine this is a laptop that got sent to this particular teacher. They fire it up once they receive it. As it boots up, it goes through some basic conversation if it can reach out to Microsoft immediately. Otherwise, it's going to want to prompt for an SSID to be able to get on a network. We have to provide some basic regional data just to make sure that the keyboard is laid out correctly. And then once we do, in this particular case, as it's reaching out to Microsoft, it pulls down a JSON file, which is a configuration file. If you've done imaging in the past, it would be somewhat similar to an unattended XML file that would provide some answers to the configuration. It takes a look just to see if there are some basic updates that need to be applied to this particular OS that's rolled out to this VM. And then when it's ready, it'll go ahead and prompt for username usually, and then password. In this case, I've gone ahead and in the back end applied that this device belongs to Kara Coleman. So it actually prompts and welcomes the particular user. You don't have to go with this methodology, in which I'll show you with the student, where it's just a generic login. But for this, all I have to do is apply the password, and then it'll let me go in. And then as it logs in, a couple things are going on in the background. So this device is Azure AD joining itself. It's also pulling itself into alignment with management in Intune. So it's going to set up and prep the device. And as you can see, it's going through a couple different pieces of securing the hardware, joining it to the network, like I said, registering it with Intune, and preparing it for full management with Intune for Education. So to go through these steps, we'll let this run. And the nice thing about this is at the end of this, it'll be fully managed, it'll be fully secured, it'll have any applications, any configuration pulled down to it that it would need and ready for the user to be able to use it. As it reboots and we come up to a login screen, now we can log in as Kara. Notice I'm logging in with a full UPN. That can be something that could be changed in configuration where you would only have to log in with the first set of the UPN, and then this would be implied, similar to on-prem, being able to have a default domain. Keep in mind, this device has never touched an IT department's hands. This goes straight in and is configured and locked down without being imaged, without having to worry about SCCM or MDT or any imaging technologies you may have used in the past. This went straight virtually in this demo from purchase to the end user, and only requiring them to log in with their credentials and an internet connection. As you can see, the last couple pieces, last journey on this is to make sure that security policies based on the user account that I'm logged in to is pushed down. If you had any certificates that needed to be pushed down to it for network access or different things along those lines, and then any apps that would need to be pushed down to it. While we're waiting for this to complete, let's pull up the Intune for Education dashboard and take a look at some of the pieces that'll be going into this process. So this is the Intune dashboard. And in this particular user that's a teacher, this teacher sits under Contoso as teacher. Let's look at some of the things that could be assessed here. So we can see that Kara is a part of our users group under Teachers for Contoso High School. Some of the apps that are associated that'll be assessed during this provisioning, we're just pushing out web apps to the teachers by default in this particular demo. So these are just, would take them straight to a browser. We're pushing out Kahoot. So if they want to play Kahoot questions with their students. And then just for basic hygiene or basic apps that go into the environment, I have wrapped the MSIs for the 7-zip install and also for Notepad++. For settings, there's quite a bit of settings here, as you can see. We'll go into this a little bit with the student configuration. So we'll actually set them up for a student that we're going to demo. looks like Kara is almost finished. And just to show you also that besides having the full Intune for Education console available to you, as was mentioned, you do have full access to the Intune for Enterprise. So this can still be pulled up, it can still be utilized by your more technical staff for back-end control. And in this particular setup for Autopilot, there is an enrollment status page. And for this, that's what you're actually seeing in this screen is the enrollment status page. And some of the things that are being pushed down to it. In the enrollment status page, these are things that are required to occur on the device before it's certified as compliant and before it actually allows access to the desktop. And some of the things that are being pushed down to it are things like 7-zip and Notepad++. So those two things are being pushed down, and then also making sure that this is locked down. And while we're waiting for Kara's to finish setting up, let's go ahead and set up Ashley, who's one of our students. Let's look at Ashley and see. Make sure Ashley is set up in here. Ashley is set up in our group for Contoso High School. So I have a setting that I'm using for the teachers right now that you'll see. It's for branding for the lock screen and for the desktop. I already have it set for the teachers. I'm going to go over and pull that configuration over to students so that students all have the same experience. All right, simple as that. So instead of having a no group policy like you would in a traditional Active Directory environment and having to go through a group policy to set this, or maybe even to capture it in your image that you would generally use, all I've had to do is go into a web console to be able to apply that. Obviously, this is authoritative, so if we were applying this in the middle of the school year, this would apply to every single student that's in Contoso High School. So if you do have branding efforts, or if you want to make sure that there's certain things that you're trying to drive home with different messaging, school spirit, a lot of those things could be used in being able to push down things like that. And we want to make sure that our students at Contoso are also receiving all the apps that they should. So let's go ahead and apply a couple apps here. Now, if we wanted to, we could apply the full install of Office, or we could also just apply the web version similar to what we did for the teachers. So let's go ahead and add all these. But there are some other things that the students use, whether they're using Wikipedia and TED Talks. They could be using things like Edmodo, CodeMonkey, Fluid Math, and GeoGebra. And then from the store, for Microsoft Store apps, They're using Duolingo, and they're using Kahoot, and they're using the Moodle desktop. And then finally, for desktop apps, I'm not going to worry about those because those are being pushed down during imaging or during provisioning. So let's save that. And then some of the settings that we want to make sure are set for our students. So we're blocking, allowing them to add Microsoft and non-Microsoft accounts. One of the nice things, you can have this actually remove the Windows 10 apps that are built in. So a lot of schools don't care for necessarily the bloatware that gets added in by different OEMs. So you could remove the Windows 10 apps that you didn't want. Keep in mind, this will potentially add an extra 30 minutes or so to provisioning. So in this particular demo, we won't checkmark that, but please, by all means, test that. So as you can see, there's quite a few different settings that you can do, even though I showed you in the main Intune console that you could set some autopilot configuration. In the name of simplicity for Intune for Education, there are some basic settings that are built into the policy set. Around security, if we want to turn on Defender and use Defender as our primary on-prem anti-malware solution, we could go ahead and set this up to do monitoring and behavior monitoring and set our scans. We can also block students from being able to change any settings that are in the console, which is always a good idea. If we were using shared devices, we could also optimize the device. So if you're not in a one-to-one scenario, then you could turn this on. It keeps things clean in the environment so that you don't have multiple user accounts. It actually cleans off older accounts as they age out. You could allow fast user switching if you like. And then you can also determine what updates are like. So say, for instance, you are heavily using the laptops for students where they're using it at home. They don't have any access to on-prem infrastructure to be able to receive policies around Windows updates. Then this gives you the ability to manage these users' devices while they're at home so that they can still receive these policies. And instead of relying on on-prem infrastructure, they actually reach out to Microsoft CDN network to be able to pull down Windows updates. And you can also keep the issue of ever having to come up with dealing with feature updates around Windows 10. So Windows 10 Enterprise and Education update every 6 months, but each version or each feature update is available and good for 18 months. But the nice thing for the fall release is it's actually good for 30 months. So if you're planning around releasing which OS feature update that you're going to use for the school year, you can use this to curb when it updates. And just to go heavily into this, you can set different restrictions. If you want to block the camera, of course, if you're heavily using Microsoft Teams and using video chat, you wouldn't want to necessarily block the camera. You can block OneDrive file sync, so OneDrive always is in the cloud and never on-prem on the laptop. Blocking removable storage like USB drives, Cortana. So quite a bit that you can set across these things. You can set the start menu, so if you want the experience for a student to have exactly what they need to see at all times, whether it's on the desktop or it's in the start menu, you can set a specific start menu configuration and push that down to users. So I'm going to save this. And let's take a look. So Kara's finished. Let's take a look at her. So pretty standard desktop right now. Got Cloud apps push down, got Kahoot push down, and Moodle. So I'm going to log off and log back in. This will allow any branding, any backgrounds to apply. So there we have one of our backgrounds for the lock screen. And then when we log in as Kara, we'll not only have the lock screen set as that one image, but I actually have a separate image for the desktop. And as you can see, the other image has been applied for branding. I don't have any particular school branding on these, but you get the point that you can apply whatever needs to be applied to be able to drill home that this is a device that belongs to the school. It belongs to whether it's a specific class, because obviously you can set groups down to based on your roster data. So let's go ahead and shut down Kara. And pull up Ashley. So Ashley has also been sent a laptop. Her device has been provisioned and ready to go with Autopilot. In her case, the laptop that she's receiving was already used last year, and with Intune for Education, you can turn on what's called Autopilot Reset. So instead of having to do things like Summer Blitz, where you take all of your machines, you bring them back, re-image them to the new image that you're going to use for the new school year, these were provisioned with Autopilot Reset, so all it had to be is reset, which puts it back to a very basic OEM instance of the operating system. So you basically have a clean slate. You ship it out to Ashley. She logs in for the first time on the first day of school. And as she logs in, real similar to what Kara experienced on being able to come in. Now for Ashley, we didn't assign this to a person. This is just assigned as a student device. So what you'll see is instead of welcome Ashley with her name specifically, it'll just prompt for a username and password. So in this case, it makes it easy to provision these, and regardless of who grabs a laptop, you don't have to have a managing nightmare backend for this. So for Ashley, let's log in as her. In the same experience, it reaches out to Microsoft and inquires and says, this is what my hardware hash is. Who do I belong to? And then Microsoft redirects it into your Intune tenant, and Azure AD joins itself. It also pulls itself into management with Intune and starts through the process of prepping the device and setting it up with all the different policies and compliances that need to be applied to it. So take a peek at the devices as they come up in the console and how they're actually realized. So for Kara's, we can see Kara's, we can see some basic info on it, what device Membership, it is. So I have the options, as I mentioned, around autopilot reset or factory reset. I could do a full factory reset and it completely removes it from Intune, from Azure AD, and it's ready to maybe be removed from service completely. But when it comes to autopilot reset, it removes all the personal files and apps and settings from the device, but it keeps it enrolled. So now it's ready to be used for that new school year. So if I do an autopilot reset through here for Kara's machine, it's going to go ahead and get a policy ready. Now, obviously, I already turned off Kara's machine. So her machine is turned off, and the next time it gets booted up and is able to have an internet connection, it will go ahead and go through autopilot reset. So as you do hit your school year end or sometime during the summer, and you want to start getting these machines prepped and ready to go for the new school year, you can start doing rolling autopilot resets to the devices to get them prepped and ready. And at next boot, they are ready to go. All right, so Ashley's is up and going. And as you can see, logging in as Ashley. Her first time experience for logging in. And like I said, this device, whether it was brand new purchased and shipped straight from the OEM or straight from a partner like CDW, you can work with your partners and OEMs to pre-configure these hardware hashes in your tenant at ship time. So you purchase it on your behalf, we can go ahead and put those into the tenant and ship them straight out, whether we ship it straight to each particular school or however you want to do logistics around shipping laptops to your student body, to faculty, to staff, etc. Then you've got that capability of it's already in your tenant, it's already a known device, and when they boot it up for the very first time, it will have all the configuration pushed down to it in real time at first boot. Really giving you the agility to be able to have a mobile workforce if you need to, but also to be able to very quickly even send it to these schools to be able to have teachers hand them out if you are doing a one-to-one scenario. And as this completes, real similar, we've got boot up, device is ready. Now, if we were using something along the lines as OneDrive already in our school environment, we're using known folders, this would also propagate, so giving you very much of a similar roaming profile feel so that their desktop files, their documents, whatnot, that all those things would be synchronized up at first boot. We can see that they've received all of their web-based applications that we've pushed down to them. And then if I log off and log back in, the rest of the policy should push down. And it'll probably just take a little bit to push down the background policy. And to pull up Kara's again now, since Kara has received a policy around autopilot reset, if I pull up her machine, Now, the other nice thing about Autopilot Reset is that it can be set in the same policy for group targeted policy, so that the Autopilot Reset is built into the login screen. So if you have in-school building staff that you would want to have automatically reset it just from the device itself, that could also be used as a feature when it comes to troubleshooting problem devices where you would want to quickly reset them back to standard. You could also use that as a mechanism for repairing devices that have issues. And as you can see, now that the policy has applied for Autopilot Reset, this device knows that it needs to go through the steps to reset the operating system. As it stated, it's going to remove all apps, all save files, and all configuration around this particular device. What it does still maintain, though, is it's still Azure AD joined in the back end, and it's still a known device in Intune. So the next time this device gets rolled out to a user, it will already be pre-provisioned for that, but it'll be ready for the next person that it's assigned to. And as we wait for that to reboot, a note about some of the things that are available around remote management of devices. So there is an application called Quick Assist. So as noted in one of the slides, Quick Assist is similar to remote assistance. It's similar to TeamViewer at a real basic level. So if you need to give assistance to someone, you can assist another person. It gives you, based on your identity, and now I have a security code. And for this particular person, if I was alarmed by what was happening and I wanted some assistance, I could pull this up and tell them my number. And share out my screen. Now, if you're using Teams, obviously you can use Teams to also provide the capability of supporting somebody remote through screen share. But for a nice simplistic way of quickly getting to somebody's desk and allowing a help desk staff to be able to get to your machine, whether you're faculty, staff, or a student, you now have the capabilities of being able to access their device is with interaction with them. So you can't just snoop on them or hop on. There are surely other ways to do that if need be. But quite an extensive capability for a free tool that's built into Windows 10 and often overlooked, unfortunately. Okay, so besides doing an autopilot reset from the Intune console, you also have the ability to do it directly on the device. So if you have more of an on-prem focused staff, that wants to directly interact, or even in using scenarios where a machine is having problems or needs to be repurposed, you can quickly do a Control Windows R. And if you do Control Windows R, you get this new screen. And this allows the autopilot reset to run. Now, granted, you have to be able to log in with an account that has local admin rights. So not just any student can go and do an autopilot reset on their device, nor your staff. So just to allow that to occur, so as we log in, and do show resetting Windows. Sometimes we'll see that the recovery environment or WinRE for the Windows recovery environment isn't available. There is a command to be able to go in to make sure that WinRE is turned on, which is available online if you search for autopilot troubleshooting. That's the reason we saw that on this particular screen. I didn't have WinRE turned on. And the command for that is reagent C /enable. So now this is going to reset. This will take a little bit, so we'll pause and then we'll come back once it's done. All right, so now we have two of our VMs here. They were both used for Kara, for the teacher, and for Kara's, we autopilot reset hers through the Intune for Education console. And then we have Ashley's. Ashley was a student. Hers, we went ahead and did an autopilot reset directly from the screen, where we did Control Windows and the letter R for reset. So when we do Control Windows R, it prompts us for an administrative account that has the rights to do the reset, so that not just any student could go and do that, or any of your staff for that matter. So now both of them have had a full reset. And as you notice, they're both up at a normal login screen. Now on the back end, they're still Azure AD joined. They're still being managed by Intune. They just need to have their user logged in. So in this scenario, you know, the summer has gone by and Kara no longer works for the school system. She's moved on, and Ashley graduated and her machine's still valid, and it's going to be repurposed to a new student in the high school. So first, let's log in as the new teacher. So we have Craig as the new teacher. He's logging into his new machine. Let's go ahead and have Omar also log in to his new machine. And you'll notice that the final steps, of course, like any user's normal first login, that this might take several minutes. This goes ahead and provisions the user account, if you recall, you have a default user that it uses that default user identity on any given operating system to spin up the first basic settings for a user. And that's really what's going on here, is it's taking that default user policy and profile and making a copy of it. So let that run for a minute or so. And just to make sure while they're coming up, let's look and make sure they're in their groups that they need to be in between the teacher and the student. So if we look at the high school and we look at teachers and we look at users, and we see that Craig is one of the teachers that's in this group that will receive all the same settings as what Kara received last year for her settings. Nothing's changed, so he'll still get the config for the background, he'll still get applications, he'll still get any of the security parts. And then for the high school, let's make sure that Omar is in here, and if not, we can add Omar into this group. There's Omar. Let's go ahead and add Omar now. So Omar is a part of this, and will receive everything that Ashley had prior. All of the config, all of the URLs, and web applications pushed down to his desktop. Fingers crossed, we're almost there. Let's check out Craig's. Since this is first login, some of the things will show up. As we can see that Kahoot is already starting to download. So that's occurring in the background. Same for Moodle. So we'll give this a little bit of time to get that config. Now you'll notice that the background hasn't updated or anything yet, but the policy has been pulled down. And if we take a peek under the hood, we should be able to validate that Craig is. This device is registered by his account under the Contoso Azure AD environment here. And if we look under info, we can see that policies have pulled down. I can go ahead and push sync just to force it to make another additional sync, just to make sure everything's being pulled down to this device. While we wait for that, let's look over on Omar's machine. Omar already has some of the things on this machine. As we look under settings, we'll see that this device is still in the process of updating. So a word to the wise that at the very beginning, as it's reaching out on its first initial seed policy data, that there will be some things that haven't been received yet. You can see that he is Azure AD joined. Some policies have already been pulled down onto this device also. and force a sync. All right, for Omar's, I'm going to log off and log back in. And also for Craig's, I'm going to log off and log back in. So Craig's already has received all of the profile policy settings. So you saw that the background is already changed on his. Then for Omar's, there's probably just a few things that are still running in limbo to true up this device. We'll give his just another little bit to receive the rest of the policy. While we're doing that, I'll go back over to Craig's. So background is up to date. Kahoot, Moodle, Notepad++, which was our packaged MSI. Some of our URLs that we pushed down, like TED Talks, is already on this device. We can see that the Windows Store apps that we selected are pushed down. And now we can see that things are really starting to go on Omar's machine. So Omar has the desktop updated that corresponds with the Contoso High School configuration. And we'll also be receiving the other apps and stuff that we've pushed down. We can see that single sign-on is working. So when I went in, it took us right to the web version of Word. Okay, so we've got Omar's machine updating with the apps that we pushed down. So you can see that from the time that we booted it up to having a single reboot to apply policies and pull the policies and configuration down for applications, that these are now truing themselves up. So now Omar has a new machine that didn't have to be re-imaged. It didn't have to necessarily be brought back into your IT department to be reset. Otherwise, then as machines were being brought back in at the end of the school year, for Ashley's computer last year, the only thing that needed to be applied was the Control Windows R key set, and to have an admin login occur on that device to allow that to happen on her machine, so that it was ready for Omar in the new school year. And then also, as we saw on Kara's machine, that we were able to reset Kara's machine remotely through the Intune for Education portal. And upon applying that request policy, that the next time it received policy, it went ahead and reset itself, and it was ready to be shut down and put in the storage over the year or over the summer, and then deployed in the new school year to the new teacher that was receiving Kara's old machine. So everything's up and ready, and all I had to do was log into it. Also the same, not having to go back to the IT department and be reset, re-imaged, maintain an image, lay down that image. So lots of less effort that has to be put in to getting these devices up and ready for a new school year. So hopefully this has provided some good insight to correspond with what we talked about earlier, to really let you see what this looks like and be able to play around with it. So thanks a lot, everyone. All right, so after looking at those demos, I'm going to hand it off to Brandon and let Brandon tell you about some of our services that CDWG can provide you.
Thank you so much, Ben. I appreciate it. I'm still in very much awe of your skills and the capabilities that you can show through the demos that you provide. And of course, this webinar can only do a small justice to really the many different areas of the EMS suite, Intune, Autopilot, and the M365 suite for a single hour that can provide us and our customers. So we're really excited to offer many different ways to provide services to our customers. And we realize in this day and age that the statement of doing more with less is no more appropriate than what we're seeing today with the market and things going on. So what we always want to do is give our customers a way to kind of choose their own journey. And that's what this next slide really shows us here, is that outside of the summer blitz that Ben had talked about, is maybe just everybody needs a little bit of help here and there, and maybe this initial setup and configuration of Microsoft Autopilot, Windows 10 Autopilot, is really perfect for your organization, because in reality there's a lot of talented staff out there that just need a little bit of nudge. They don't need a lot, they just need a little bit of help, and that's really what the initial setup and configuration of the Windows 10 Autopilot is there for our customers to have, is really just to let us help them configure some simple device and configure compliance policies, right? In addition to that, really allowing Windows Store application deployments, and of course there's some minimum requirements to leverage this. For example, we want to make sure that the EMS device management or EMS security, if you haven't already set that up, is set up. So this particular simple setup is very consumable. It's only 8 hours. It gets our customers really up and running. Time to implementation is very short. But then we jump into really the EMS security piece, and that is really one of the favorite of our customers, because deploying a devices is one thing, but really making sure, like Ben talked about, anywhere from device guard to credential guard are also covered, and really that's where the sweet spot of this occurs, is the EMS security is really helping our customers set up the tenant, setting up either security or compliance policies, or even the best part is conditional access. So outside of during the summer years of Students being at home, maybe doing some sort of extracurricular activities, they only have access to the applications that are really intended for them to be published and have access to. And that's where conditional access, which Ben and Lauren had talked about, in addition to that, is making sure when they do have to have access, whether it's during the school year or extracurricular, that their single sign-on is their credentials and their IDs are seamlessly synced up with not only the school data sync, but the credentials within Azure Active Directory. And not to mention, in the event that, of course, everybody is super busy, most IT staffs are burdened with, trying to reset passwords because, granted, everybody has passwords all over the place and sometimes you just forget them. But what if you were able to give a service that is natively built into Azure and to the EMS suite that gives you the ability to have the users do the self-service password themselves? That way, you're not in the business of resetting passwords. So it's very exciting to offer these range of services for our customers. But even more so, if we go to the next slide, you can realize that we have many different partnerships with many different hardware vendors. That's the power of CDW, is we have so many relationships with so many people that we can offer these ease of use, easily consumable services that your account manager or even you can go and purchase directly with CDW. So you can take out some of that burden to say, you know what, I just want to take these devices, which are conveniently uploaded to our config centers, and I want them just to be shipped to me quickly, easily, and without a lot of fuss, because I know what I need to do as a customer. I can get them up and running myself. So that's the power of these two services. And then moving on to a really exciting service that really has been quite popular for our corporate customers is the Microsoft 365 Security Assessment. Ben kind of touched on a couple exploits, and of course, one of the things that people don't tend to talk about, which is nerve-wracking because in this most recent day and age, is there is many different exploits, many different hackers out there that are trying to get into the education institutions, whether K through 12 or higher ed. People need help. With all the different realms of security controls, like Ben had talked about, pass the hash, protecting the credentials. What are some of the things that your security staff, or if you have a security staff, how do you protect your organization in that sense? The security assessment allows us to help our customers go a little bit deeper than, say, just these other services I had mentioned before. And what's really great about this particular service is it's 3 days worth of effort. So it doesn't take the IT staff out of their daily lives too heavily, right? But we go over many different things. We review the security landscape with your organization, with the faculty, with the IT staff. And we review and validate the business needs because it's not just about the technology. It really is a balance between people, process, and technology. And I think people forget that. So what we really like to do with this service is we go into all the features that Ben had talked and Loretta talked about, anywhere from Windows 10 security to EMS configurations of policies to locking down maybe even the ability for users to change device drivers. Because a lot of times once a person gets into the workstation, whether through an exploit, a browser hack, or whatever, and they start changing things, what if you were able to lock those down and not have that kind of concern, even though that's always a concern, but you have an ability to lock that down from the gates, and we give you the advice to do that. Addition to that is we don't just come in, give you the information and leave. We give your organization best practices. We give you the tools to successfully mitigate security risks, because we all can't have our wonderful Ben Moore on every single implementation. We'd like to, it's just not feasible, but we do have consultants and engineers to really fulfill those needs at scale. And this is extremely popular. And not last but not least is we really want to use the built-in functionality that's living within the cloud. Office 365 Secure Score is such a tremendous power that when we do our voice of the customers with all the education institutions we work with, they tend to they know about Secure Score. They know about Message Center. But the problem is they don't understand how to interpret what they're seeing. So Secure Score can give you a whole list of things that you can do to really fully protect your organization and your faculty and staff. But in context, you don't have that information. You can't realistically make that little bitty change that could protect your organization without a little bit of guidance. So that is extremely powerful, and we do work with you guys and the customers to help implement Secure Score in a appropriate, business-specific manner. And also, you can add things to it. If 24 hours seems like it's just not enough, and after we go through the sizing exercise, the customers and you can come back to us and say, you know what, we need a little bit more. We need a little bit more beyond what you've had listed here, because we want to balance between cost effectiveness, depth, and completability as far as the overall solution. So Ben and I are extremely excited about this one because this is extremely popular. People get a lot of value out of it. We provide them a beautiful roadmap and report after we leave. And of course, since we are your trusted advisor, we don't stop there. You can reach out to us anytime. We can do many different things from information protection to identity protection, all the way down to making sure your email is protected as well. So with that, I'll hand it back to Gabe to close us out. And thank you once again for everybody joining. Very exciting stuff. And of course, reach out to us anytime you have questions. Back to you, Gabe. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandon. And thank you to Lorena and Ben. You did an excellent job. For more information, please visit cdw.com/Microsoft. And thanks for attending.